y'all Sunday that I don't do, when I'm up here, I don't try to go to the Bible because I'm not I read the Bible and I listen to the Bible, but I'm not a Bible person. I don't grab verses and dissect them like the preacher does. So tonight's presentation is probably going to be a little bit different than what you're used to. The subject matter is not mine, it came from my wife. But I did all the research on it, so blame me if you're disappointed in what I've got to say. So many times we attend church, whether on Sunday, Sunday night, Wednesday, and we go through the service without thinking about where all the information being presented is coming from. I know that Pastor Phil preaches from the good book, and we are blessed because of that, because he knows it inside out. And we are blessed because of that. But what about the songs that we sing during the service? Anybody ever thought about that? Who wrote them? What were the circumstances? Why did they write them? Is there a real reason, or did someone just sit down and write a song? There's a lot of hymns that have just been written. People sit down and collaborate with the lyrics and the melody and put a song together. But tonight I want to explore the real story behind some of the classic songs that we sing all the time and that we take for granted. So let's get started with a song most of us know by heart. Amazing Grace. The song is one of the most beloved hymns of the last 200 years. It's estimated the song is performed annually 10 million times. That's every year, 10 million times. The song was referenced in the anti-slavery novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, and it had a surge of popularity during two of our nation's greatest crises, the Civil War and the war in Vietnam. The song is closely associated with the African American community, but ironically, the song was written by a former enslaver named John Newton. Newton was born in 1725 in London to a Puritan mother who died 2 weeks before his 7th birthday. His father was a sea captain who took him to sea at the age of 11. After many voyages and the reckless youth of drinking, Newton was taken into the British Navy. He attempted to desert, but was caught and received 8 dozen lashes and was reduced to the rank of common seaman. Later, while serving on the Pegasus, an enslaved Persian ship, Newton did not get along with the crew, who left him in West Africa with a man named Amos Clow, an enslaver. A rescue attempt was undertaken by a sea captain who was asked by John's father to look for the missing son. After his rescue and during the voyage home, the ship was caught in a horrendous storm off the coast of Ireland and almost sank. During that time, Newton prayed to God, and the cargo miraculously shifted to fill a hole in the ship's hull, and the vessel drifted to safety. Newton took this as a sign from the Almighty and marked his conversion to Christianity. His conversion did not radically change his way. His total reformation was more gradual, just like it is for us. He later wrote, and I quote, "I cannot consider myself to have been a believer in the full sense of the word until a considerable time afterward." He did begin to read the Bible and viewed his captives with more sympathy. Newton continued to sell his fellow human beings, making 3 voyages as a captain of 2 different vessels. He suffered a stroke in 1754 and retired. 10 years later, he was ordained as an Anglican priest and wrote 280 hymns to accompany his services. The words to Amazing Grace were written in 1772, And in 1835, William Walker put those words to the tune New Britain. 34 years after his retirement, he renounced his former slaving profession. So he was an enslaver for years and years and years, and really didn't come around to really believe in God and everything else until way late in his life. Anyhow, I thought that was really interesting. Because He Lives is another song most of us are familiar with. Amazing Grace was written in 1772. That's 248 years ago. Does anyone want to guess the age of Because He Lives? You've heard it lots of times. The song is actually younger than I am. But that could be a pretty long time, I guess, if you think about it. The song was written in the late 60s by Bill and Gloria Gaither. They were going through a really rough time in their lives. Bill was recovering his strength from a bout with mononucleosis, and they, along with their church, were the objects of accusation and belittlement. Gloria was experiencing a time of torment, including fear of the future and bringing children into a crazy, mixed-up world. If you recall, there were a lot of protests going on because of the Vietnam War. People rioting in the streets. The military was being criticized because they were the military. Anyhow, as Gloria sat alone in a darkened living room, tormented and fearful, the Lord sent a calm and peaceful rest to her. The power of the resurrection of Jesus seemed to affirm itself in their lives once again. Gloria remembers the realization, and this is a quote, that it was life conquering death in the regularity of my day. The joy seemed to overcome and take precedent over her frightening human circumstances. And this song came out of their personal bout with darkness. It's amazing what prayer and listening in silence for an answer will allow the mind to do. Gloria recounted, and I quote, "Gradually the fear left and the joy began to return. I knew I could have that baby and face the future with optimism and trust. It was the resurrection affirming itself in our lives once again. It was life conquering death in the regularity of my day." Another song that y'all know is "In the Garden," or "I Come to the Garden Alone." This song was written by a former pharmacist who served as an editor and manager of a publishing company for 37 years. According to his great-granddaughter, the song was written, quote, "in a cold, dreary, and leaky basement in Pittman, New Jersey that didn't even have a window in it, let alone a view of a garden." The song was first published in 1912 and popularized during the Billy Sunday evangelistic campaigns of the early 20th century by two members of the staff. Another song that you're all familiar with is "Blessed Assurance." And it was written by Frances Jane Crosby, who was born into a family of strong Puritan ancestry in New York in 1820. As a baby, she had an eye infection which a quack doctor treated by placing hot poultices on her red and inflamed eyelids. Excuse me. The infection did clear up, but scars formed on her eyes, and the baby girl became blind for life. A few months later, Fanny's dad became ill and died. Mercy Crosby, widowed at 21, hired herself out as a maid, while the grandmother, Eunice Crosby, took care of little Fanny. The grandmother took responsibility for her granddaughter's education and became the little girl's eyes, vividly describing the physical world. Her careful teaching helped develop Fanny's descriptive abilities. The grandmother also nurtured Fanny's spirit. She read and explained the Bible to her, and she always emphasized the importance of prayer. When Fanny became depressed because she couldn't learn as others did, the grandmother taught her to pray to God for knowledge. I went one too far. In 1834, Fanny learned of the New York Institute for the Blind and knew that this was the answer to her prayer for an education. She entered the school when she was 12 and went on to teach there for 23 years. She became somewhat of a celebrity at the school and was called upon to write poems for almost every conceivable occasion. In March of 1858, Fanny married a former pupil at the Institute. He was a musician who was considered one of the finest organists in the area. One evening, a friend and composer of Fanny's was visiting and played a tune on the piano, asking Fanny what it sounded like. Fanny responded, "Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine." The friend and Fanny continued to sing the melody and write the lyrics together. Okay, I've got one more. A lot of you will probably appreciate this one when I tell you what the song is. I'm going to kind of save it to the end. Imagine, if you can, that everything in your life is going just as you planned. You're happily married. You have a wonderful family. You're at the pinnacle of your career. And you have managed to squirrel away enough money. Squirrel away means to save, to you young ladies. To squirrel away enough money to provide for your family's every want and need. But what if tragedy strikes? Not once, but multiple times. What if your golden life, your ticket to Easy Street, was taken away in the blink of an eye, at no cause of your own? That's exactly what happened to Horatio Spafford, the man who wrote one of the most stirring hymns in the Christian hymnal. Spafford was a successful lawyer in Chicago who had invested heavily in real estate along the shores of Lake Michigan. He was a prosperous man, a devoted husband and father, and a devout Christian. But in 1870, a series of events began to turn his world and life inside out. Horatio and Anna's only son, Horatio Jr., died of scarlet fever at the age of 4. The following year, while still mourning their son's death, every single one of Horatio's investments were lost in the Great Chicago Fire. A few years later, aware of the toll that these events had taken on his wife and their 4 daughters, he decided to take the family on a holiday to England, where they would accompany his friend, the famous evangelist D.L. Moody, on his next crusade. Shortly before they were set to sail, a last-minute business development threatened to derail the trip. Horatio persuaded his wife and the children to go ahead, saying he would follow along shortly. In November 1873, Anna and the girls boarded the French ship Ville du Havre. I knew I was going to have trouble with that when I wrote it down. 4 days later, Horatio received the devastating news that the ship had collided with another ship named Loch Earn, an iron-hulled ship. The French ship sank in 12 minutes, taking with it the lives of 226 passengers. 6 days later, when the survivors had reached Wales, Horatio received a brief 6-word telegram from his wife. "Saved alone, what shall I do?" As soon as he could, he boarded a ship to join his grieving wife. En route to England, the captain of the ship called him to the bridge and said, "A careful reckoning has been made, and I believe we are now passing the very area where the Ville du Havre sank." According to Bertha Stafford Vester, a daughter born after the tragedy, her father wrote the song, while on this journey. Horatio and Anna's faith in God never faltered. He later wrote to Anna's half-sister, "On Thursday last, we passed over the spot where she went down in mid-ocean. The water's 3 miles deep, but I do not think of our dear ones there. They are safe, dear lambs." I will close with this. Anna remembered something a friend had once said. "It's easy to be grateful and good when you have so much, but take care that you are not a fair weather friend to God." Anybody want to guess the name of the song?
It is well with my soul.
Who said that? That's it. Did you know the history of it? I did not until I read this. And the biggest thing to me was Miss Ellen. That was her favorite song, and every time she sat down, if she had time, she'd play it, at least a little bit of it. Any comments, any questions?
There's a new song written just this year by a guy named John Mitchell. Birth to God, he wrote it in 30 minutes.
Wow. It just came to
It's brand new, it's about 2 weeks.
yeah. And it was interesting to track some of this stuff, and most of the people, the guy that wrote Amazing Grace had a hard time coming around to his faith, but he eventually wound up there. But most of the time, most of the writers of some of the old classics had faith in God, and they lived it and wrote it, put it on paper for us to enjoy. Anything else? Yeah, ma'am.
Some of the hymns, like we sing, and I mean, it's been around forever. I can remember my mama singing them to us. And when we would go to church with her, one of the most wonderful memories is hearing her sing in church. And it's the songs like In the Garden was one of her favorites.
Yeah.
And she just loved it. And those songs hold a special memory. And when you put the backstory to the hymn, then you go, wow.
Yeah, where'd that come from? Yeah. Well, it's like the guy in New Jersey. His great-granddaughter said he, sat in the basement looking out the window. There was no garden there. So what was the inspiration? What came over him to write down those words? And to what you said, Diane's mother and my mother both had that as their favorite songs. I Come to the Garden Alone. And it's hard for me to sing it. Yes, sir.
Getting back to Amazing Grace, another fact about the song was he could barely play anything on a piano. That's where the music was set to it. And ironically enough, the original transcript of the song, all notes were played on black notes. There were no white notes used.
Wow. Yeah. What fascinated me about that was the fact that he was white, and the black community really took it up and kept the song going. I thought that was pretty cool. Yes, ma'am.
My son-in-law knew how much I loved the song It Is Well With My Soul. The day after William died, which will be a year ago next Sunday, he bought a beautiful wooden plaque with that engraved that I've got hanging in my living room.
Well, that's one you won't forget that for a long time. Yeah, and I sit here and I can still see Miss Ellen sitting up there playing it. Maybe just real soft, waiting for church to start. She would play just a little bit of it, and then church would start up and she'd quit playing and go on about her business. So, anyhow.
She played it because it was Rob's favorite song.
Yeah, well, there you go. Now, the question I've got is, did she know the backstory?
Yes.
She did? Okay. Yeah, knowing her, she probably did. But I didn't. So, I had a good time trying to put all this together, and I hope y'all enjoyed it. Something a little bit different. But it's still talking about God and our connection with Him. and our beliefs that go along with that. But if there's nothing else, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the words that you've given to us tonight to honor those who have written songs in your name, to praise you, and the songs that we still sing to this day, even though they're 200 years old, over 200 years old, we continue to sing them on a daily basis. I thank you for the people that are here tonight. I ask for a safe journey home. Bring them back at the next appointed hour. And I ask all these things through your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.